It was almost 9 a.m., and the clouds were the color of nicotine. They stretched to the horizon, puffed out like a million smokers just exhaled. They were brought by a cold wind from who knows where, and Nash knew snow wouldn't be long. He checked the sat-nav again as the turn for Thorn Lane approached. Then, finding a dirt track road with no sign, a track as narrow as the wheels of his BMW, he pulled off. Carefully driving down its twists, he lost sight of the main road in his rear-view mirror.
"You have arrived at your destination,"
said the dead voice from the dash as he reached Rose Cottage. The little house was drawn from a biscuit tin, and all it needed was the coming snow to complete it. He found a widening and pulled off the track, glad it was no longer the season for tractors in this part of England. Adjusting his bright blue tie, he lifted his black briefcase from the back. Then, crunching the gravel to the door, he ignored the doorbell, bashing on the wooden panel instead. Hearing movement inside, he waited a full minute before bashing again. Suddenly, he heard a bolt on the back of the door shift, and then another, and the door opened a crack. Into view came an old woman with a face of crumpled paper.
"Who is it?"
she asked. "Evan Nash of Findlay Everard Agency. Miss Agnes Payne. I'm a collector, Miss Payne, a debt collector. I've come to collect a payment from you for an outstanding debt."
"Debt? But I don't owe anyone anything."
"Not according to our records, Miss Payne. Let me in, and we can talk about terms, because I'm afraid I can't leave here today without some form of payment,"
"Oh dear,"
said the old woman, struggling to open the door. There was a mound of unopened mail behind it. Spotting one of his company's letters on the floor, Nash stooped to pick it up. "This is from us, Miss Payne, one of our letters. We've been trying to contact you for well over a year about this matter. Don't you open your post." He looked down at the bent old woman, dressed in a tattered shawl, standing before him. She was barely 5 feet tall.
"I'm quite old and no one ever writes me nice letters these days,"
she said, shuffling toward the living room. "You should open these letters, the ones from us," said Nash, following her in. "You owe us quite a lot of money, you see, and this problem isn't going to go away until you sort it out."
"Would you like a cup of tea?"
she said. Nash exhaled sharply, looking around for a place to sit amongst the piles of old newspapers and rubbish strewn on the floor and chairs. "Yes, okay. But we have to sit down, if we can, and talk about this. I'll need to leave here today with a check." The old lady shuffled through an arch into the kitchen, then lifted an iron kettle from the stove with both hands. Nash found an armchair and, examining it for stains, decided to put an old newspaper on it before sitting. The room was dark despite the curtains being fully open. The smoky light from the weather didn't help, so he got up and flicked the light switch, but no light came on. "Oh, God," he said under his breath, sitting back down and exploring the room. Her living conditions were squalid, and he opened his account book and read from the notes. He looked up to investigate a noise from the kitchen and saw the old woman struggling to pump some water from the sink into the kettle. She didn't seem to have taps, just a large handle for pumping water. He didn't recall ever seeing such a device in a sink before, except in old movies. Biting his lip, he looked around for signs of anything valuable, but apart from the old newspapers and periodicals, there was nothing. The only thing of any note was the bizarre wallpaper. It was the most unusual thing he had ever seen. He leaned closer to examine it. The yellowing paper looked years old and had an irregular pattern on it. every 5 inches or so, set in diagonals, was a figure of a person. Each one was different, not a pattern at all, and only the regularity of the placements formed anything resembling a pattern. The images stretched across the 4 walls like a comic book, printed in the same style without the panels. Nash stared at the figures. It was actually a clever design, as each figure was unique and a realistic representation. The image nearest to him was a baker carrying loaves of bread. The comical man had a red face, angry looking, and he carried an armful of his produce. His clothing was from the 1950s, and Nash looked closer to see if it had been hand-painted, but it seemed printed, a natural part of the design of wallpaper. Despite its weirdness, it was really quite impressive, and he wondered how on earth it had been made. Such a printing technique was surely lost to time. Amused, he looked at another figure, standing now to get a better view. One was a telephone engineer, complete with toolbox and gormless expression. Another was a farmer holding a stick aloft. There was a coalman carrying a bag on his back. Most were tradesmen from different eras, but some were not and more recent in appearance. Each design was a caricature, intricate, humorous, and well painted, if indeed it was paint. He concluded it must be, as he spotted a few blank spaces around the room on the walls, places where there should have been a figure, but was empty. He nodded in mild approval. The only thing of any note, but utterly worthless, in an otherwise bland house. Just then, he heard a noise in the corner. He looked to see a big rat sitting on its haunches. Nash couldn't help but exclaim a sound. Ugh! Then, picking up a pile of magazines from a side table, threw them at the creature. The rat was as black as a piece of coal and ran along the skirting board in Nash's direction. The man leapt up and onto the armchair to get out of its way. As it scurried by, Nash felt his heart thrash against his chest, and he watched in fright as the creature slipped through a hole in the floorboards.
Don't hurt Simon,
called the old lady from the arch now. She was holding a tea tray. Simon, said Nash.
He's my friend,
she said in her frail old voice, setting down the tray and seating herself. It's a bloody rat, cried Nash, climbing down from the chair and checking to make sure the thing hadn't poked his head out from the hole again. Miss Payne poured 2 cups of tea with a dash of milk and sugar. Nash reached across and took the chattering cup from the old lady, but only pretended to sip some, putting it close to his lips and making a slurping sound. I was looking at the account book, and it seems you were guarantor for a £50,000 loan paid to a Mr. Geoffrey Payne 14 years ago. No payment was ever received, and so interest over the years has been added by the original company and collections agents. Countless letters have been sent to both Geoffrey and yourself here, but apart from an initial payment, no money has ever been received. So as this Geoffrey has never been located, the debt falls upon you, his guarantor. The old lady shook her head feebly.
but I don't know anyone called Geoffrey.
Nash sighed. Look, I'm really sorry for you if that's true, but this all happened years ago, before our time. We bought the debt, you see. Letters have been sent here, plus other collections agents must have visited according to this list. You must know about this matter. You have had a lot of time to sort this out and clarify this debt in case of fraud or identity theft.
I'm old.
She said, sipping from her cup.
The world is so complicated now.
Perhaps if you opened your post once in a while, said Nash. I'm really going to have to insist on some form of goodwill payment today at the very least. You can give me a check, whatever you can afford. 500 would be enough to send me away today. Then I can leave you and Simon in peace. She shook her head.
But I don't have checks. I don't even have a bank account that I remember.
Nash put his head in his hands and let out a deep breath. What about cash? He said. You must have cash tucked away somewhere. He looked around the room again, but his attention was always drawn back to the wallpaper and the characters on it, all in their humorous poses. The confused old lady looked to the kitchen.
I only have a tea caddy with some money in, but it's not much, just enough for my food shopping from the store in the village.
Nash held out his hands. There you go then. What have you got in there? The old lady got up and Nash waited while she rifled through her kitchen cabinet. She shuffled back with the tin and showed him.
This is all I have left this month,
She said, and Nash reached in, taking all the notes out. He counted out nearly £200. Is this really all you have? He said. You must have more than that. You have a pension, don't you?
Just the state pension.
She said.
But I won't have any more for weeks. Mr. Gentry sorts all that out for me in the post office when I get food.
Nash shook his head. Well, that'll have to do then, he said, putting the money in his pocket. I'll pay this against the debt you owe for now, but I'm afraid you are going to have to pay regular amounts from now on. Plus, we'll have to put a charge against your house.
Charge?
Said Miss Payne, alarmed.
What's that?
Well, it means that my company will own a part of your house up to the value of the debt, including interest, which is sizable. Now, of course, it's unlikely the courts could force you to sell it, but they could. It depends on the value. But if, for instance, you went into a home, then the house would be sold, and after we have collected the money you owe us, you would be left with quite a nice nest egg. Wouldn't that be nice? You could take a cruise somewhere sunny.
But I wouldn't have my home.
She said. Care homes are like hotels these days, said Nash. You'll love it there. You'll have human friends, other really old people like you to play cribbage with, bingo, ballroom dancing, whatever. Owning property is a burden for you at your age. You'll be glad we did it. Nash picked up his case and gave a final look around the place. I've been meaning to mention this, but your wallpaper is really unusual,
It's always been there.
said Agnes.
As long as I've lived here. It changes all on its own, you know.
Amazing, he said, not really hearing, and then pointed at a figure on the wall. This one here, he reminds me of my old boss. He was quite a drinker. Vanished off the scene a few years back, poor old guy. Those cheeks. He laughed. The figure was a man walking, dressed in a suit with bright red cheeks and a bulbous red nose. He was flustered looking with ruffled hair. Nash laughed again at the comical caricature and made for the door. He crunched down the drive and got into his car, immediately dialing the office. I got some cash, Debs, he said. Only 200, but make a note to visit again in a month, and we might get some more out of the old bat. She's a bit fuddled, but if we visit just after her pension is paid, we might get more out of her. Nash hit the highway, putting as much distance between him and Rose Cottage as he could. He took his hands off the wheel to smell his palms. He could smell the same musty fragrance that filled the old lady's house. Spotting a travel chef, he pulled over and parked up. Finding the gents, he went inside and washed his hands. He scrubbed away in the brightly lit bathroom. As he washed, he admired the cleanliness inside. It was as spotless as a hospital room. Suddenly, out the corner of his eye, he noticed a large shape moving. It resembled a piece of coal darting across the sink area. He turned his head sharply to see. Now sitting up on his haunches and perched on the wash basin behind him was a large black rat. Nash squeezed the bar of soap between his fingers and screamed. As night fell, Agnes was asleep in her armchair. She didn't hear the scurrying and rustling coming from under the floorboards. The rat poked his head from inside and, checking the old lady was asleep, squeezed through its hole. It struggled with something, pulling a curled piece of paper through, holding it firmly between its paws and mouth. The creature ran with it along the floorboards and jumped up onto the old sofa, climbing up until it found a vacant spot on the wall. Then, unfurling the paper with its paws, pressed it against the wall, like a bill poster pasting a new advertisement on a hoarding. The rat smoothed the paper over the wall, imprinting the image from it like a transfer. When finished, the rat crawled back to the edge of the sofa and admired its collection. On the wallpaper was now the cartoon-like picture of a man, a funny caricature dressed in a suit with a bright blue tie and a black briefcase at his feet. There was a bar of soap in his hand, and he had a funny, frightened red face.